Okay, well, we are going live here on HR Girlfriends, and whether you are watching this webinar directly through Zoom or on one of our social media platforms, I welcome you. I'm really excited about today's guest, and I think you will be too, especially when I run down one, her topic, and two, what she's going to talk to us about. So, today's webinar, and for those who don't know my beautiful face, I am Sana Rasul, Chief Girlfriend at HR Girlfriends, and I am in charge of all things HR and all things girlfriends here. And what we do here at HR Girlfriends is we support the knowledge sharing and resource swapping, among other things, along with professional development and personal growth of the women of HR. And today we have Madhuri Kannan, and she's an HR professional with over 10 years of experience in 3 countries. We're talking US, India, and Finland. So she definitely has a global exposure and some global lessons to teach us about communication. Today's 3 C's of global teams is going to talk about collaboration, communication, and culture. And Madhuri, she's been working with Fortune 100 organizations and nonprofits focusing on talent management, talent development, employee engagement, and strategic HR. Madhuri will share her expertise with us. She will demonstrate that the key to managing the modern mobile workforce is to focus on cultivating teamwork and collaboration, constant, and I'll emphasize, and meaningful communication and understanding and respecting each other. You can successfully lead your organization, whether you're virtual, mobile, or any platform. And even if you're global, your team can be successful with the right communication. And so, without further ado, I want to say hello to Madhuri. How are you?
Hi, Sana. Thank you so much. I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. Thank you so much for joining us today. Your communication presentation has been long awaited. We pushed you back a little bit because COVID went crazy on us, but we're so glad to have you. So tell me, what interests you in getting in on this topic at this time in front of the HR Girlfriends audience?
When I worked on this topic a few months back, it was more about now most organizations are looking at global teams, HR managing remote teams. HR could be located anywhere in the country, could be managing teams across the country. So that was the key, some of the key aspects which I wanted to share. How, as HR, how we can ensure that our teams collaborate, communicate, understand the different aspects of culture when we are dealing with global remote teams. But unfortunately, the times are such that because of we didn't expect that a global pandemic would suddenly turn all of us into remote global teams. So this, and without any preparation, that's the biggest challenge that we are facing right now. One fine day from suddenly all of us started working remote, all of us started communicating virtually. So all of us started working with people from different parts of the world. So that is what is, I think, the key to actually being successful managing global teams, being trained and understanding what are the key factors that would help us succeed in it.
So I would assume that you've been able to work with organizations that have done it either really well or not so well. And so there were great lessons learned. Yes.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, my first organization and the second organization that I worked in India and Finland, I have worked on I have, in fact, trained managers, especially managers who manage global teams, remote teams. This is the first training that we do for them. That what is important when you're going to be managing remote employees? Why is communication important? Why is making sure you collaborate really well? Why is it important that you understand the cultural differences?
Yes, that's huge. Well, I know I'm looking forward to your presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to let you share your screen and you're sharing, and we're ready for you.
Thank you so much, Sana. So, hello everyone, and thank you for taking time out to join the session today. And I'm here to just talk about 3 C's of global teams. And I would like to thank Sana and the team at HR Girlfriends for giving me this opportunity. And it was really amazing platform, HR Girlfriends, and I discovered it accidentally on LinkedIn. And it's been really great being part of their sessions, looking through their resources, and utilizing uh, this opportunity for sharing some of my expertise and thoughts on this. So thank you so much, everyone. Moving on. So what are we going to learn today? We're going to look at 3 C's, 3 important C's of managing global teams: communication, collaboration, and cultural differences. So what are we going to do is identify barriers in each of these aspects, and then identify how we can overcome these barriers and be effective in our communication and our collaboration, and also understanding the cultural differences between teams. So beginning with just some food for thought. So when we look at this cartoon, so what do we see? I'm sure we see that there's a clear lack of communication between both the teams. One person, the two teams don't even have a common, clear objective. They were probably not even sure what they set out to do in the first place. And this is sometimes very similar to a situation that you would see in an organization. There are two managers who are busy arguing about what the objective was the rail line supposed to be here or there, but the team members are not bothered about what's happening. They are just busy watching the all of it unfold. So this is sometimes very common that you would see in an organization. In an organization where, especially where the communication is not very transparent, where you have teams executing, working towards a common goal from different parts of the globe or different parts of the country. Until some time back, until a few months back, most of the research was working on trying to find out how much percentage of our workforce is going to be remote or mobile, or how many of us are going to be working with global teams. And predictions were like from 30% right now, it would be about 40%, 45% in about 5 years' time, in about 6 years' time. And it is important for us to start preparing our teams, start preparing our managers to make sure we are all prepared to handle remote global mobile teams. But one global pandemic has made us all handle global remote teams, mobile workforce within just a day. So we are completely unprepared. And so it is important for us to make sure we understand what makes us succeed in such an environment. What will make us succeed? What are the key success factors for us to succeed in such an environment of remote global workforce? As I said, the first important aspect is workforce communication. So what are some of the barriers that we see to communication? Of course, the physical barrier, not being able to see the non-verbal clues, gestures, posture, etc. When until a couple of months ago, when we were all meeting in a meeting room, we would be able to see how everybody is taking a communication, how people are reacting to it, what people are thinking about it. Sometimes it might not really be in words, but now that is a great barrier, physical barrier, not being able to see the nonverbal cues, gestures, and postures. Cultural barriers. And now we're going to be having Zoom meetings with people from across the globe. And the cultures aspects are different for every country. Some people is different for every generation, different for people. Sometimes even the city that you have come from can shape the way how you communicate, whether you would prefer a two-way communication, whether people prefer a top-down communication. So there are a lot of barriers that come um, to in terms of culture when it comes to interacting with people, um, not physically in person, but if it's going to be virtually through Zoom and other technology Language barriers. There are a lot of team members. All of you might be working with a lot of team members for whom the first language is not English, or as I said, might be from different parts of the country where their first language is not English. So then the communication again, when you're in person, if somebody is not able to follow you, you can repeat, you understand, you repeat, you were slow. But when it's virtual, there's always that barrier that you're not sure if everybody is getting what you're trying to communicate. And of course, there are a lot of biases that we all come with. Sometimes we do not realize that we carry some of these prejudices, some of this stereotyping. It could be something as simple as, I'm sure a lot of us, if we are from generation X, Y, Z, baby boomers, whatever generation we are from, we all have some kind of stereotyping that's attached to us. We all think millennials are someone who do not take very good to criticism. So some of these might be some very generic stereotyping that all of us are prey to, but we might not realize that we are carrying that stereotyping when you're actually communicating with the other person. We've, I'm sure a lot of us might be dealing with millennials. We might not really realize that we carry that stereotyping when we are communicating with them. Even at the slightest um, response from a millennial, we might think, oh yeah, millennials don't take criticism very nice. So there are a lot of such stereotyping that we all carry with us. So that's one of the key barriers. And of course, active listening. Key messages can be lost if we are not actively listening, and it becomes very, very critical when it is completely a virtual meeting. A lot of us might be multitasking, especially in the current situation. We all have a family and a lot of members in our family that we all are taking care of. Small children, elders, we are attending to so many things at home, and also being part of meetings. If we are not actively listening, we can lose some important messages. So these are some of the very common barriers, especially in a virtual communication. So active listening, let's if you have to just quickly check how actively people are listening, how do you do that? When you are talking and when there are questions asked at the end of it, make sure you take notes. And when there are questions asked at the end of it, you get a response. From that, you can actually understand how actively people are listening to what you're talking. So this is just fun food for thought. So we might be thinking people are actively listening, but yeah, they might actually be on mute and people are busy with their own selves. So in a virtual environment, what should we remember when we are communicating with our peers, with our colleagues, with our team members? So another set of C's for us to communicate. So always be clear in your thought, minimize the number of ideas in a sentence, just communicate what is required. Instead of sending an email, can we quickly meet? Why don't we specify what are we meeting for, so the person who is coming in for the meeting is prepared with what he needs to come in for? So can we quickly meet about our sales target? Can we quickly meet about our sales projections for Q2, for Q3? Can we quickly meet about how we performed, about the performance management? Can we quickly meet? So what is it that we are going to talk about? Make sure you are clear. And again, there was another point that I had mentioned. So always be concise. So can we quickly meet at 3 p.m. for this particular, what is the objective of the meeting? So be clear, be concise. Let's not go about, oh, other day I had a meeting with the senior management and they were talking about the sales numbers. It's not looking very good. So I thought maybe we should have a meeting. No, that we are anyway, you're going to meet with a person. So just keep all that background information for the meeting when you meet them, when you actually meet the person. The email communication, because right now, I'm sure all of us have experienced this, that we have loads of emails coming. We have loads of online meetings. So people do not have the time to really look through every single line in an email. So when you have a lot of information on an email, it is bound, people are bound to miss the key messages that are there in the email. So when people are actually looking through hundreds of emails in a day, please always make sure you're clear, you're concise, just stick to the point, keep it brief, you're detailed, but at the same time focused. So you are going to talk about the sales. I'm just using the same example, so it's easier for us to understand. So you are going to talk about the sales numbers for the next quarter, but at the same time, also make sure your email mentions only about that. So do not mix multiple ideas. So if you want to also talk about the performance of the person in the last quarter, you also want to talk about the overall organization objective goals. You also want to talk about the person's individual development plan. No, don't mix too many things in one email, wherein the person actually then misses the key point again. So the key objective for your meeting is going to be the sales numbers, the sales projections for next quarter. Then keep the email just to that, clear, concise, and concrete. And this again, also make sure you write your email is correct and error-free communication. Because as I said again, people are going to be looking through hundreds of emails and hundreds of other collaboration tools for information. So if your messages are not going to be error free, then again, people are just going to ignore, thinking it is just something that is not very important. Your message should be coherent, it should be complete, and of course, courteous. Coherent is again logical flow of information. It should be relevant to what you are setting out to discuss. So for example, in our example, continuing with our example, if you want to talk about the sales projections for next quarter, it should talk about, if you want to give in the background, so CEO meeting, and we are looking for presenting the sales projections for next quarter by next week. So I would like to meet with you today at 3 p.m. So stick to the topic and make sure you have a logical flow of information. Do not jump back and forth. So last year, what did we do? I'm not sure. I think we're not doing great this year. I would like to know the numbers because CEO also asked for it. So that is going to confuse again the person as to what is the main objective of the meeting. Is the objective of the meeting trying to compare with our performance of last year, or the objective of the meeting is to understand why we are not, or what is the projection for this year? So stick to the topic, be relevant to the topic, make sure you are clear in what you're trying to say, and make sure the information that you share in your email is logical. And all relevant information, in case if you want your team member that you're inviting for the meeting to bring in some information, bring in some, do some analysis and bring in that information to the meeting, make sure all that is mentioned. So I would like to discuss our sales projections for quarter two. Make sure if you have to collect data from different teams or if different team members, make sure you do an analysis with the comparison with the previous year of this quarter. So make sure you mention all that information in your email. Of course, make sure you're courteous in your emails, and I'm sure a lot of us understand, we would not like to receive an email that is not courteous, that's not friendly, at the same time honest, and of course in an aggressive tone. So what we would not like to receive, let's not have the habit of sending it to others too. So that was one aspect of success in global teams, in remote teams, teams that are collaborating virtually. Communicating, make sure you communicate as Sana was mentioning, make sure you have constant communication with your team. At the same time, meaningful communication. Let's not use our work hours to share information that is not relevant, share our political views, share our similar likes and interests in sports. So let's not keep communicating about something that's not relevant to what we are working towards. So yes, it is important to connect with your team members. It is important, but let's also keep some time for a personal connect. So that's what we are going to be looking at next. So how do we collaborate with our team members? So how do we work together? It's just because now all of us are going to be working virtually and all of us are remote doesn't mean that all of us are going to be working in silos. We still need to collaborate as much as we were collaborating when we were working in the same physical space. So you are still going to be having those meetings, you're still going to be sharing ideas, you're still going to be taking inputs from another team member. So but now it's just going to be virtually. So how do we, what are some of the barriers that would stop us from collaborating effectively? Right now, it is the physical distance. So when we, because of the physical distance, we shouldn't start operating in silos. We shouldn't start, that shouldn't stop us from sharing information. That shouldn't stop us from um, the work culture that was existing earlier, which was collaboration, teamwork. If we were all in a huddle, working together, sitting together, and sharing ideas, that should still continue. So, because if that does not continue and we start operating in silos, it's going to lead to lack of trust between team members. If the team members realize that some of us are holding some information, not sharing all that we know, they're going to lose respect, and that is going to lead a lot of uh, misalignment in the team. So now then all of us would not be working towards a shared important common goal. So that is why it's always important that we collaborate. When we collaborate, we still continue to work in the same way that we were working in a shared physical space, share all the information that's needed for the team to succeed. You can have internal competitiveness. That is important for all of us to challenge ourselves, to work better, to improve ourselves. But at the same time, that shouldn't be at the cost of the team not achieving the goal. So um, it should be all of us still share our ideas, share our thoughts, share what we think is good for the team to succeed. And of course, as I said, the cultural differences should always be taken into consideration. We should always be um, be aware of what where the person is coming from when they share a different perspective. It could be a different mindset, it could be a different generation, it could be a different background, educational background could could cause a difference in what different perspective, educational background, or as I said, countries. Of course, countries is something very common that all of us understand. Different countries have different cultures. But some of the other cultural differences that we don't really perceive are, as I said, the educational background. Somebody who's come from a professional educational background, from somebody who's um, come through a lot of experience, might be very different from their perspective. Somebody might come with theoretical background knowledge, somebody might come with actual practical experience, and that might give difference in perspectives. So always be aware that different mindsets, different perspectives, different are there would be there in a team, and make sure to take opinion and perspectives from different team members. In when you're sitting in a physical space, you would be able to see that somebody is not really agreeing to what is being shared. But when you're all on a Zoom call, you would not really know if a person is actually agreeing to what is being discussed, or does he have a different perspective. So if you find somebody who's not um, sharing their perspective or thoughts on something that's being discussed, make sure to ask them. Maybe they are holding back because they feel that they feel intimidated to share their opinion because they're different from what the rest of the others are thinking in a meeting. So make sure different mindsets and cultural differences would exist. Make sure to collaborate, ask for opinion, and respect and trust other team members in the team. So again, a quick fun for that. So the patient, I feel sorry for the patient. As he said, whether to pay the bill or not is his choice. So one thing that could help really when you are collaborating in a virtual team is the clarity in roles and responsibilities. So this image, though, is a fun thoughtful expression of why it is important. I would like to stress why clarity of role and responsibilities is really essential. So the doctor and the anesthesiologist should know whose responsibility is it to give the anesthesia. Something as critical as that, it is really necessary, especially when you're working in a virtual team, to have clear roles and responsibilities so people do not cross on each other. People do not feel that I'm not being valued, I'm not being given enough responsibility, my role is not as significant as someone else in the team. So those kind of issues would go away if you have real clarity in each individual's role and responsibilities. So another example, that was a bad example. So now looking at a good example, if you see in an airport, of course, now I'm sure a lot of things are going to change, but yeah, how it existed pre-COVID times, if you see in an airport, there is never any confusion about who handles what. So if you need, if it's your first time, if you're flying, or if you are someone who is a little, who doesn't travel very often, and someone, if you see, if someone really senior citizen, so they might be looking for help. So if you ask a person whose role or responsibility is not about addressing the question that the person who's looking for help has, they would clearly point out to the person who has to help you. So every single person, be it the immigration, and be it the person who's managing the baggage, be it the cargo, be it the police, the be the person who runs the airfield, the air traffic control, even within the air traffic control tower, every person has a clear demarcation of their role and their responsibilities. The person who's going to handle the incoming aircraft is not going to handle the outgoing aircraft. The person who's going to take care of the landing is not going to monitor the air traffic in the when the passing air traffic. So everyone has a clear role and responsibility, and that's exactly why they function so smoothly as they used to. So this is one example, good example of why it is important for us to clearly communicate the clarity in role and responsibilities of every single team member. So everybody should be clear of what they're going to do. A team has a common objective. Each team member has a specific role they have to do to achieve that common objective, and each of them have a specific responsibility that they need to deliver to achieve that common objective. So that is when everything put together, you would, as a team, you would be able to succeed. Now moving on to the third C, which is the most important C, which is the cultural difference. So why is it important to understand the culture? So I'm sure if you look through Wikipedia or any other definitions, the culture would be defined as a collective mental programming of a human mind, which distinguishes one group of people from another. So what this programming is going to influence? The way we think, the pattern of our thinking, what is the way meaning people attach to various aspects of life. So how work-life balance, for a group of people, for a generation of people, work-life balance would be more important. For a group of people, for people from a different generation, success at work would be more important. For people, especially being from HR, this really becomes important when you're trying to engage with your employees, because as you handle teams with multiple generations, people with multiple backgrounds, you understand that people associate different level of importance to different aspects of work. Some people think personal professional development is very important. Some people think reward and recognition is more important. Some people think work-life balance is more important. So that is exactly why I say culture is one of the most important aspect of being successful in collaborating virtually, because it is important for us as HR. It is important for managers to understand that different people in their teams might be associating different things, meaning to different things that they come across in workplace. So because of the meaning that we attach to our behavior is also going to be different. So when I'm recognized, that's going to motivate me to work better. When I have opportunity to develop myself, I'm going to perform better. When I'm going to be more engaged with the organization, when I have a really good work-life balance. I'm sure a lot of us come across employees who say, no, I do not really want to continue working in this organization because there's no work-life balance. I do not get my personal time. I do not have time to spend with my family. I'm not able to get back home on time. So these are very common things that we hear as HR when a lot of employees mentioning to us. So this is exactly why it is important to understand what people value in at workplace. So, and now that we're going to be global teams, it is more important that we understand the cultural differences. So Hofstede's dimensions are some of the most important research and analysis that's being done in terms of cultural differences. And this is more in terms of trying to understand people from different countries and people from different generations. So if you have to look at the 6 cultural dimensions, these are power distance, uncertainty, individualism, masculinity versus femininity, long-term versus short-term orientation, indulgence versus restraint. So if I have to just briefly look at what each of this means. Power distance is just explaining to you the how each distribution of power takes place, and how you perceive the distribution of power. Some societies might be really hierarchical, some societies might be really flat. So as I said, some people might prefer top-down approach. Some people will prefer the manager to give guidance on what needs to be done. They might be able to perform better only when the manager is able to guide them as to what needs to be done. But some people might prefer a more flat organization. They would want to perform. They want to they would take the initiative to understand what's need to be done, and they would perform on their own. They wouldn't wait for a manager to actually give them instructions. So that is power distance. Uncertainty avoidance. Some people would prefer clear clarity on and would not prefer if you have some last minute requests. So if I'm sure all of us have come across people and teams where managers would always prefer things that are really planned, things that are really laid out well ahead. So last minute requests for vacations, last minute requests for doing something additional tasks with respect to their role. Some people do not like it. So that uncertainty is something that some people would like to avoid. Of course, with the right now, the times that we are in, I'm sure most of us are tuned to deal with uncertain times. But yes, but I'm sure how we deal with these uncertain times also there's a difference. So some cultures, some people who are okay to deal with these uncertain times might be reacting to it more positively, while people who do not like this uncertainty might be reacting to it more negatively. They might just be waiting to for all of this to get over so that they are clear on where you are headed in terms of personal or professional lives. Individualism versus collectivism is as a culture or as a generation. How do we look at how do we achieve? Whether people have preferences for being alone and left to look after themselves, or they would want to remain in a network. They would want to connect with people. It could also be gender based. Sometimes it could be educational based, as I was mentioning to you. So some people would always prefer to operate in a network. Some people would prefer the society or the people around them to accept what they're doing. They would want that recognition, outward recognition. But while some people are happy with if they are happy with what they're doing, they really do not wait for acceptance from others or others to appreciate them. If they are happy, if they know that they're doing the right thing, they're just happy with that. Masculinity versus femininity is, again, as I said, it is the society's preference for being assertive, achievement, material reward, while femininity represents more cooperation, caring, being caring, empathy, showing empathy for others. So that is again a form of stereotyping. But yes, this is also one of the important dimensions with which you could differentiate team members, or you could identify team members as to what would be more important to them in their work, professional or personal lives. Long-term versus short-term orientation is more about setting goals for towards those that are looking for really short term what you want to achieve, while some of them are already planning for something that they would achieve 20 years down the line, where they want to be 20 years down the line, where they want to, what they want to do 20 years down the line. So sometimes it could also, the society or the culture or the country could also be shaping these thought processes. Like for some, we will be looking at it on the next slide. Like some Asian countries would always work towards long term. They would always work towards, okay, after me, what do I do for my family? What after me? What, how do I plan things for my the next generation in my family? While some are more looking at short term. So what do I do in the next 5 years? Okay, I want to do something in terms of both financial and personal aspects. So these all could be defined by the culture, the country, the culture, the generation, and your educational background and experience. Indulgent and restraint is again very similar to long term and short term. If you are somebody who would like to live in the present, or would you like to be very restrained, impulses, control their impulses, restrain, exercise restraint, and look at more long term benefits of anything that you do. So this is just a short video that you would look at managing uncertainty. So if you see, as I said, this is just a very common scene that you would see. So I'm sure you understood by just looking at a few seconds at this video that these are some of the very cultural aspects of how things operate in a society. So this is a very common scene that you would see if you're driving around. This is just a junction. There are hundreds of vehicles moving around, but you don't see a police or a traffic signal. There's a lot of utter chaos that's happening. But at the same time, anybody who is there at this particular crossroad is not bothered about this uncertainty. They are completely tolerant towards this ambiguity. They are willing to take risk. You see a person on the bicycle just dashing across the street when there are heavy vehicles moving around, and it's completely unpredictable, but people are willing to take risk and they have the tolerance towards this ambiguous situation. They are not fluttered by not having a traffic signal working there, or not having a traffic policeman help them navigate this uncertain time. So such scenarios, while if you have a person from a different country or a context in this situation, they would be completely uh, taken aback. They would be completely lost. They would not know what to do, how to handle the situation. So that's exactly why I say it is important to understand. So somebody who is so used to somebody who expects the manager to give them every guidance to succeed in their professional lives, if you leave them in a team where nothing is clearly defined, people are just taking risk and trying to pursue the goals, team goals. People are unpredictable. It could be anybody working on anything, and finally you just at the end of it achieve that. Chaos might not work for everyone, and especially in these virtual times when everybody is remote, nobody really is in a sharing a physical space. You might sometimes, people might be lost. They might not even know what the other team member is working on. They might not know what they have to do. They might they might be willing to talk once or twice, discuss and understand, but when they feel that everybody is unpredictable, they are working on their in their own ways, taking risk and working on their own ways, then they might just think they lose the respect and the trust that we were talking about when during to collaborate with others in the team. So this is why it is important to understand. This is why it is important to understand the individual preferences, individual cultural differences, and collaborate as a team. So how do we manage when we're going to be collaborating as a team in a virtual space? So this is just a quick snapshot. As I told you, a lot of it is based on cultural research on the culture and the society and the countries that we come from. So where the power distance is high, where it is more hierarchical, where it is centralized decision making, where people are willing to take risk, where people are more flexible, people are more accepting to differing opinions or behaviors, where there is a tendency to avoid risk, where people prefer more standardized approach. So these are just some a quick snapshot based on the culture. So if you actually see, most Asian African countries would be really high on collectivism, would be really high on risk, would be taking risk, being flexible, managing uncertain times, because they, as a society, as a culture, they have always evolved through such times. While European countries, especially the Nordic countries, they would always try to prefer a standardized approach. They would try to always avoid risk. They would always have clear rules, written rules, and they would prefer everybody adhere to those rules. They would really prefer stricter social norms. So these are some aspects, as I said, where countries and culture contribute really a lot to how we behave as individuals. So we did see some the three important C's, the three important aspects to succeed as a global team, as a global virtual team, global remote team. So it is communication, constant and meaningful communication. And the next C is collaboration, making sure even though we are remote, even though we virtual, we do not operate in silos. We still collaborate with one another. We still work the same way. We still work together and in the same way that we used to in a physical space that we were doing sometime a few months back. And the third one is understanding the cultural differences. Understanding the cultural differences could be in terms of the country where we are from, the education background, the experience, the generation that we belong to, and how so, we are as an individual. Family also shapes a lot of it. So there could be cultural differences, could mean any of these, and not just the difference that's very obvious in terms of gender or the culture or the country that you're from. It could mean any of the underlying factors, which is, as I said, with respect to your education experience, family background. Anything could shape how you are as an individual, or how you're different as an individual, each of us in a team. So how do you overcome barriers? We saw what are the barriers and how we could overcome for each of these three things individually. But as a team together, how do we overcome barriers to all these three C's? So the first one would be set ground rules, team customs. So when you're in a virtual global remote team, how do you minimize conflicts? How do you minimize, overcome your barriers? How do you be effective? Would be to agree on team customs, set some ground rules, the way in which you interact. Make sure you set, for example, if you have an email, now most of us are communicating over emails. Set ground rules as to how do you communicate over emails. If somebody's asks a question in a team forum, make sure anybody responds to it within 24 hours, within 48 hours. Set some ground rules. Anybody has a question, anybody has some data to share, have a common place where you all share data. You are no longer in a common physical place where you just turn your laptop or your desktop and show whatever information you have. Or by virtue of sitting next to each other, you know what you're working, people know what you're working on, or people understand what you are, what information you're using, what information you have. People no longer have access to that common space, physical space that we used to have earlier. So it is important to have agreed customs, team rules. It is new for all of us. We are also used to sharing. We are all so used to storing information on our own laptops, on our desktops, or folders that are there that are specific to our laptops. And we might just share the screen when we have a meeting. But now, because we do not have that shared common physical space, it's important that every piece of information have a shared file sharing space, or understand how you're going to share information, and set rules on how a maximum response time to emails, um, guidelines if you need guidelines on language in emails too. How we were talking in person would not be appropriate in an email. So if as a manager, if as HR, it is important for us to share these guidelines, it is necessary given the times that we are in. So we might be sharing political views, we might be taking a dig at people's political views, or people's sports team that they're supporting. When that lively banter that we have at the coffee table or is not okay in a professional email. So make sure if you have to share as HR to the teams, it might be necessary for us to share. Have regular team communication and team meetings. So that's the next important aspect. So as I said, make sure team members regularly communicate. It is important for collaborating as a team in a virtual team for each of us to understand what each of us are working on. It is important to understand each other's contribution. It is important to appreciate each other's contribution. So as a manager, when we are, as a HR, when we are sitting remote, we might not realize if somebody is putting in 12 hours of effort, or if it's somebody is putting in 3 days of continuous effort to make sure something works or something succeeds. So it is important to appreciate, it's important to recognize, and it is important to make sure other team members are aware of this. So if somebody is putting in an effort, that could be shared with other team members, so that one person isn't putting in all the effort and feels drained out at the end of it. Make sure you distribute, share the work, all of them collaborate. It is more important to ensure that people do not operate in silos, given the current situation that we are in. And as I mentioned earlier, the third important aspect is to clearly define roles, responsibilities, goals, tasks, processes. So make sure until the last detail is clearly defined and mentioned. So people, as I said, do not operate in silos, collaborate with team members, constant communication is there, and people share whatever information that they have. And virtual water cooler is the noun for the day. So we really don't have water coolers or coffee table discussions anymore. So it is important, as I said, other than the team meetings, the official meetings that we have, it is also important to have virtual water cooler meetings. It could just be 15 minutes a week. It need not necessarily be something really long. Or if you do not want to set up a different time, when you have your regular team meetings, you have a weekly meeting with your team, set out the first 15 minutes for some personal discussion time. It could be asking about what did they do last week, or how is their family coping up with the current situation, or what are they doing. If you know that there is something that's happening in their family, ask about that, so that people feel part of the team, people feel appreciated. And or it could be about how trying to, if you think that's you do not want to discuss personal things in a team setup, that's perfectly fine. It could be something so common. It could be about, okay, how is everybody keeping up with their exercise routine during these times. So you could be something that could be useful information. It could be something about how are you engaging your children, how are you trying to cope up with the hygiene aspects, how are you stepping out, how. So it could be something that's common and useful to all of us to do during these times. But make sure you have that 15 minutes. It could be 15-20 minutes, whatever works for your team. So it could be set aside that time for social discussions. It could be part of your regular team meetings, or it could be a Friday afternoon that as a team you just relax and discuss and spend some time trying to just have that social discussion. It is important for people to feel valued. It is important people think that they are part of the team and not just there to do a task and then move out. That's not the objective that you want to, that is not the idea that you want to have with your team. So as HR, it is important for us to um, initiate and inform, educate our managers about these aspects, because people were so used to, as I said, have that fun banter after a big ball night, after a Super Bowl night. People might be talking about that the next day at the water cooler or the coffee table, but you no longer have that. So you should actually take a time out and create that time in your meetings, virtual meetings. So that's it from my end. And thank you so much for your time. And I wish a very happy collaboration and communication to all your teams. Over to you, Sana.
That you enjoy. Madhuri?
Yeah, hi, Sana.
Hi, I don't know what happened. Technology is interesting, but we'll go with it. I was just saying that your presentation was great. It was a nice reminder of the clear differences that we actually come to the table with.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. As I said, all of us are against stereotyping or biases, but we do not realize the biases that we might carry ourselves without even actually realizing it.
And thank you so much for attending another webinar with HR Girlfriends. And thank you, Madhuri.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.